Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan, your weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. Viewers, Prime Minister's memorable visit to Australia was all over news this week. While Indians are extremely excited about the message from the Prime Minister, the grand success of the diaspora event in Sydney, there was actually much more in the trip that needs to be discussed beyond the song and dance, the extravaganza. So, what were the principal takeaways of this much awaited, very significant visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Australia? Let's discuss. Joining me straight from Australia, Jitarth Rai Bhardwaj, well-known journalist, has been covering events in Australia as well as India-Australia relations very, very keenly. Welcome back to Media Scan, Jitarth.
Thank you, Smita.
And also with us, Jay Shah, who is the director in the Indian-Australian Diaspora Foundation. He is actually the media head of the foundation and he was instrumental in arrangements in the Sydney event. Welcome to Media Scan, Mr. Shah.
Yeah, namaste.
Namaste. And yes, with us, Anil Trigunayat, well-known diplomat, author, analyst on strategic matters. You have heard him on Media Scan on several occasions. Welcome back, sir. Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaskar.
And my first question is to Jay Shah. Mr. Shah, I can imagine the kind of groundwork, the homework, the legwork that must have gone into arranging such a grand gala event in Sydney. But now that the event is behind us, the excitement is over, what would you say are the principal takeaways or the big takeaways for the Indian community living there, the messages from the Prime Minister and the things that will remain memorable for the community for a long time to come? Your take.
Yeah, thank you, Smita ji. I think to start with, yes, definitely it was a very grand event. Thanks to diaspora, it turned out to be, spectacular, much more than what we imagined. And having the presence of both the prime ministers on the stage was a showcase of, the two great democracies that we belong to. So all of us loved it. There was, cultural extravaganza and it was an electrifying atmosphere. I think the key takeaways from my perspective in this is, number one, that people-to-people ties are very, very important in taking this relationship forward. Number two is India and Australia now are accelerating the relations at an unprecedented pace that we've never seen before. And I think both the countries are realizing that how complementary, their offerings are or their strengths are, and it must be leveraged, for each other's benefits. So I think these are some of the takeaways I think that have come out from this visit of Prime Minister Modi to Australia.
But, beyond the Sydney event, Mr. Shah, I am also curious to know, there are many more concerns of the community there in Australia. The vandalization in the temples, the problems faced during travel, visa issues. Students have their own respective problems. How do you see the Prime Minister's visit maybe helping in resolving some of those issues or at least creating an ecosystem so that the problems can be solved in a smoother way?
I think if you see the statements from the recent visit, it has been made clear from Prime Minister Modi also requested, and Prime Minister Albanese very graciously said that the vandalism of temples will not be accepted and the relevant departments will take actions at a very fast pace. So I think the issues are very much on the top of priorities, if I may say, on both the sides. In terms of student mobility and other things, I think there's already some agreements, signed in that, and we will see in near future, as Prime Minister Modi said, that we are going to take this relationship at the next level. So, in last 1 year, we've seen almost more than 7 to 8 cabinet ministers visit Australia, and I think it's going to continue. And as Prime Minister Modi ji promised, that it is going to, the relationships are going to go to the next level.
Right. Thank you for putting it so clearly. Jitarth Bhardwaj, I'll come to you now. Do you think the relationship between India and Australia is at a position to be taken to the next level, and how?
Smita, I would definitely like to call it next level. I mean, we are on the next level right now. If you
Right.
look back 9 years back when Prime Minister Modi came to Australia, he was just trying to understand Australia and Australian government, companies, industries, and academia was also trying to understand India and Modi. Right now, he has come back, the tables have turned. Today, in last 3 days, we saw queues of the best and topmost CEOs lining up to see Prime Minister Modi and requesting him some sort of help to scale their business in India. This has never ever happened to any Indian Prime Minister that Australian resource company asking him, sir, can we resolve these issues because the final comprehensive trade deal will take another year or something, 12 months onwards. I can't wait months. I want my business to scale up now today. Can you help me on that? We had a financial institution at the scale of Australian Super, which is saying that we want to invest in Indian infrastructure to the tune of $2 billion. But because of the trade deal, we have these issues. Can you help us to resolve this with Indian government so that we start our investment? There were three vice chancellors and the CEO of Australian universities. She was asking, can you kindly grant us permission? We want to apply to establish campus. Four more universities want that those campus to be established before February intake now. I mean, imagine that two Australian universities have already been granted permission by Indian government. Four are in queue, and they want to have it now before February intake so that they start taking students.
So, as an observer, Jitarth, as an observer, would you say that while discussions on that big trade deal are still underway, India and Australia have reached a position where our partnership in trade, in education, even as you are saying, now that we are opening up for foreign campuses, has reached a level where India and Australia can be declared as very close partners?
I mean, they can't be more closer because of two very important sectors, the lithium and the chips. I mean, in this electronic world, I call it electronic world, nothing is possible without chips. Australia has got the rare earth and India has that capacity to be the powerhouse or the factory of world to supply those chips. So I think if India and Australia were not the closest of friends, this cycle was not going there. They would have relied on some other country. But right now, America, Australia are relying on India right now.
Fine. I'll come to Ambassador Trigunath here. Sir, you just heard our friends from Australia, from Melbourne, telling us what a robust relationship was reflected in Prime Minister Modi's visit down under. But really, I mean, there are still a few sticking issues, aren't there? Whether it relates to trade, the trade deal is still underway in the discussions. There are issues about attacks on the Indian community or our religious places there. Also, this thing about the university campus, some people have expressed reservations. How far do you think the Prime Minister's visit has helped in ironing out those sticking points, those differences, so that we can move forward on a stronger level?
Smriti, thank you for having me on your show again. I fully subscribe to the views expressed by both the previous speakers from Australia. This was one of the most significant visits of Prime Minister Modi, which was definitely result-oriented or trying to close the gaps that existed. If you remember, he has already met Prime Minister 6 times, this Prime Minister, Albanese. But at the same time, if it was just only for just a visit, he would not have traveled all the way from Japan to Australia. He had already met the Squad leaders and Albanese there. But he came especially to Australia, continued on the bilateral track of the visit to address all the issues that you posed to both our colleagues. In fact, Australia-India relations today are at their highest pedestal. I had witnessed them before 2009. I mean, they were very difficult in 1998, starting with our nuclear tests. But today, this is a relationship where each one is seeking the other out. And as Prime Minister said, this is the T20 mode. That is a very fast track. And the two MOUs that were signed are very instrumental in this. And one was on mobility and migration, as you mentioned, which is very key for our community and for our professionals, for businesses. And the second one was on the hydrogen energy task force
Yes.
in the climate change. But so I can say that often our this relationship is often described in the CDE format. For example, C stands for cricket, Commonwealth, cuisine, and commerce, as well as critical minerals, critical technologies. That's very important. 4Ds are, of course, democracy, defense, dosti, and diaspora. And the 3Es are essentially economy, energy, and education. So that shows the depth and the breadth of the relationship which is there. And both sides are equally committed to it. And Prime Minister Modi, and you know that, I mean, apart from the semantics and the symbolism of the visit, it was a substantive visit, in
Yes.
my view. And I think that this relationship is very, and more importantly, we have not talked about defense and security, where also discussions were held. They are both having a possibility of aircrafts in each other's countries, trying to have interoperability. Next Malabar exercises are going to be held in Australia, off the coast of Australia. So these are all very important ongoing, whether it is in the Quad format, whether
Yes.
in the bilateral domain, or the trilaterals that
Ambassador
we have with
Trigunath,
Australia.
sir, you have mentioned all the, the entire gamut of issues that were on the table and how we have progressed on them. You also mentioned the Malabar exercise, etc. But, just ahead of the trip, the fact that the planned Quad summit could not take place the manner in which it was planned, but Prime Minister Modi decided to go ahead with his Australia trip. Do you think it was a bit of a disappointment in the sense at the multipolar level, because many more issues could have been discussed otherwise? Or do you think what happened finally is quite satisfactory?
No, Smitaji, the thing is that President Biden is stuck in his domestic politics of the debt
Yes.
ceiling and all. Now, obviously, he could not be away for too long because otherwise his government would have gone bust. Obviously, he had to return to, and that was understandable. But the fact that the Quad summit happened in Japan again, that is something that they met. That shows that the importance they attach to Quad and its mechanisms, and the kind of statement that came after that, which is action oriented. I mean, if you come to think of it, since the last 4 Quad summits, every time we have had a very action oriented. And
Yes.
it is always accompanied by what next would be done. And this is not simply that you have a meeting, issue a statement, and go away. So
No,
there are
certainly,
things that are
certainly it
moving
was
on.
not one of those trips or
Yeah, so
meetings.
but the fact
Yes.
remains that Prime Minister chose to travel to Australia, shows the importance of Australia and the issues that were facing, which needed to be ironed out, talked out one-on-one with Prime Minister Albanese, and also to assure the Indian community, which faced some downturns in the recent times with regard to the temples and gurudwaras and all that. So I
I'll
think
come
that
to
this
that.
is
I'll come to
something
that. Jai Shah, the downturns that Ambassador Trigunath has just mentioned, I want to get 2 things clarified from you. Number one, the Prime Minister spoke, even though there was a lot of bonhomie and warmth throughout the trip, on the question of attacks on Indians and some separatists raising their heads using the Australian soil to, foment anti-India sentiments, the Prime Minister was very, very categorical in saying that such things are completely not acceptable. And it seems the Australia government, even though they have assured in the past, will have to do little more in order to make the situation conducive. What is your perspective on that situation? How do you see it going forward? And also, how much of a positive change or a helpful situation can be attained by this maritime mobility agreement that has just been announced? Very quickly.
So, if you come to the statement on the attacks, I think one thing I noticed was that it was on top of the leaders' joint statements, both when Prime Minister Albanese visited India in March and right now. So, what it indicates is that it's definitely being discussed, pretty, I would say, on priority and pretty seriously between the two leaders. And we've seen some action from the Australian side coming up, post March, and I think it will just accelerate going forward. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm very hopeful that will definitely, it will get resolved. Australia is a very multicultural fabric, and we are very proud of this multicultural society. So it will definitely get resolved. With the mobility agreement, I think
mobility,
post-COVID,
yes.
yeah, I think post-COVID we have seen a lot of traction in this area, and Australia did face a skill shortage. Probably, in the COVID there was a lot of national shortage of skills. They were saying. So definitely, it is in the interest of Australia as well to get more mobility and get more skilled skilled people to the country to boost up the economy.
Jitarth Bhardwaj, tell us why does it so happen that even when Prime Minister Albanese spoke in the earlier meeting with Prime Minister Modi, and this time round there are strong assurances from the head of the government there, but on the ground complaints do keep happening. Are there elements in Australia who are using the Australian soil to foment anti-India sentiments? And also, what I asked Jay Shah just now, how do you think this visit might help to mitigate the situation?
See, not only this visit, Smita, there has been a lot of work done in the background by Indian security agencies and Australian agencies, that is ASIO and AFP.
Okay.
So I have been reporting and in touch with these agencies. We get some information, and believe me, just because of that information, these agencies are gathering from not only from India but also from Canada and USA through the Five Eye program of Australia. They have understood that what India is saying, that this Khalistan menace is dangerous, they are extremists and can have very lasting effect on the communities. When I say communities, I don't mean Indian community in India. I mean Australian community here in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, or any other city. So now Australian authorities have kind of understood this work. The next 3 months phase is how to mitigate, how to do it, how to get them crushed on. However, through Australian laws.
So you are saying that the administration, the law enforcing agencies in Australia, now they are finally sensitized to the challenge, the threat of these people, and now it has to be translated on the ground.
Absolutely, and the first reflection of that was when that bogus propaganda event was cancelled in Sydney. That was the first reflection of that, and then consequently they tried to protest or did whatever. That was also permission was not given, and police categorically told that it will be an illegal protest if they do so.
Yes,
and then
we do remember. We do remember that very well. Ambassador Trigunayat, are law enforcing agencies in various parts of the globe, their governments, finally becoming sensitive to the challenge of anti-India forces using their soil, to drum up sentiments against our people, our country? Or do you think Australia has made a beginning? Much more needs to be done in the West, such as the UK, US, etc.
Well, I think that these destabilizing agencies or separatist kind of elements who are operating outside and creating these kind of problems very often also take advantage of the local complicity. And I think that India has to be extremely cautious that it is very likely that these might increase further during the time, and there could be an agenda. I mean, those people are there, they are thriving on this, they have nothing to lose. Whereas Indian Sikhs have nothing to do with them. I mean, that is the difference. But they want to create these problems. So we have to be very careful, whether it is the Sikh community, whether it is the Muslims, whether it is other minorities. So we are seeing that there is an often certain kind of reports that are brought out, which are ill-conceived and targeted. and therefore it is very important. And hence, Prime Minister Modi very clearly telling Prime Minister Albanese about the security of the Indians and the Indian worship places and others, and which must be addressed. This can only be done by their security agencies. So those countries have to take India's concerns on board and into account and be accountable. I mean, you cannot say simply that we have a democracy, so people are doing this or that. It does not work that way. You have to look after your own country also. So, but once occasional event here and there happens, that can happen despite all security. That is understandable. But when you have a concerted campaign, then it is extremely difficult. I mean, then you cannot absolve yourself of the responsibility of not protecting the people whom you want to come into your country and contribute to your development and success.
Right. And as Jitarth was saying, it is not just about the Indians or Indian origin people living there. It is about all, including the Australian people. However, Jaysha, I have a quick query for you. Since you were so hands-on involved in the arrangement of the Gala Sydney event, there is a discussion going on here in the political circles in India. Every time the Prime Minister has taken, and it was his vision that when he goes to a foreign country, he must not only have government-to-government interaction, he must also involve and meet and interact with the Indians living there, the wide diaspora that we have. But there were a lot of criticisms, lot of very, very sarcastic comments about this events of his, calling it names, etc. Now, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi is scheduled to address a big event at the Madison Square in the US. Do you think this idea, this vision of Prime Minister Modi of involving the diaspora also during his visits to foreign countries is an idea of which the time has come, and the opposition that was once so strongly against it is now forced to adopt the idea? From your experience in Australia?
See, from my experience, from my understanding, what I see is an Indian Prime Minister speaking to the people of India. And, it is not the politics, it is about politics. It is about India. I'm not, he doesn't make any political comments. He talks about India. He talks about investments back to India. He talks about talent factories. He talks about Swachh. At times, before he was talking about Swachh Bharat. So, when he is talking, is the Prime Minister of 150 for 140 crore people who is talking to the diaspora of its country. I don't want to make any comments on what everybody has a right to interact with people the way they want, but as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned, I'm very much clear. Each of his addresses in diaspora only talk about India, India, and India.
Yes, very quick one-line comments from both our friends on the show before I have to wind up. We have very little time left. Jitarth Bhardwaj, how significant is the idea of involving the diaspora, addressing them directly when the Prime Minister of India goes to a foreign soil? Do you think it creates an environment, or is it more than that?
It's much more than that. Prime Minister Modi has already pitched, bring a friend with you. So he's scaling tourism in India through diaspora. However, it is also important for the host country. See how Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was lapping it up. 21,000 people spread over all of Australia. They will take those stories of his party and his government. So it's important for both countries, and diaspora will drive the next growth in Australia-India relationship. That's what my understanding is.
Profound, profound. Ambassador Trigunayat, as a diplomat, as a person who deals with the, the backroom back and forth that goes on between nations, between governments, does this involvement of the diaspora in a Prime Minister's, the head of the government's visits, have an impact on the diplomatic situation also?
Yes, indeed. I mean, diaspora is our biggest strength, in fact. They are in fact, the intellectual reserve that we have. And when India moves into the next stage of the industrial revolution, I think their contribution is going to be far bigger. On the political front, today, Indian diaspora has matured significantly. We have leaders of Indian origin manning the multinational corporations. There are CEOs, there are leaders politicians who are there in a big way. And that's an important development. I mean, it shows, and I have no hesitation that in about by 2047, about 30-40 countries will be governed by people of Indian origin.
Wonderful. Let's get back on some other episode and see how it goes and whether this is really picking up pace at the way that you are predicting, sir. But I am afraid on that note, we shall have to wind up this very interesting conversation this evening. Thank you, Ambassador Trigunath, for sharing your perspective
so
as
much.
always. Also, may I thank Jitarth Bhardwaj for connecting to us short notice. I know you both are very, very tired from all that happened in Australia. So maybe you can take a break now. Thanks also to Jay Shah, who was instrumental in organizing the Sydney event. More power to you. And hope the diaspora contributes as strongly as it has always done in India-Australia relations. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes, Smita, good to be with you.
It might start between governments and heads of governments, but the fact remains that no relationship among countries or even among people is complete till everybody feels involved in it, and that is precisely what Prime Minister Modi has been aiming to do by connecting to the diaspora, to the people, to celebrities, to various people who contribute in different fields from acting to cooking to writing. Nothing could have gone better than what happened in the Australia visit of Prime Minister Modi. We shall wait for the next such visit. Till then, it's a wrap up on Media Scan for this evening. Namaskar.